And fluid around the exchange between the inhale and the exhale. Think about what you can do to make that turnover in each direction more fluid, more smooth. Give ourselves about 60 more seconds here. Just feeling into the fluidity of our breath. Last cycle of breath here. And then if it feels right for you, we'll utilize an inhale to bend both knees so that the kneecaps can point towards the ceiling. And with the kneecaps pointed towards the ceiling, let's start to sway the knees a little side to side. So you start to warm up the hips a little bit here. Remember that you don't need to go into full rotation if that doesn't feel comfortable or right for you this morning. We're just looking to explore the movement that's available to the interchange, the interconnection between the upper and lower half of the body. Knee. Next time the knees fall over towards the left, let's allow them to stay there. If you are not going into full rotation, what you can do is you can keep the left leg vertical to the computer towards the camera, and then let the right knee fall in. So you could have a little rest there, a little prop if you're not feeling like full rotation is the right thing for you. You can use the direction that we're headed towards, the left side, to be the support. Or if it feels okay for you, you can release all the way into the twist. And with that twist, we can just, once again, kind of focus our awareness on the transitions within the breath themselves. Breath themselves. Give yourself 60 more seconds here on this first side. Last 10 seconds here. When you're right, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. So the kneecaps point towards the ceiling. And let the low back relax. And as the low back relaxes, make sure your hands are in a position where you're comfortable. And then we're going to take our left ankle across our right thigh. So you have a figure 4 with the legs here. And we'll add a little slow dynamic movement. With the exhale, the right knee is going to unbend, so the right leg is going to extend. And then with the inhale, we're going to bend that right knee and bring ourselves back into this bent knee figure 4. So exhales extend, we go to a straight leg figure 4, external rotation through the left hip. Inhale, we bend, we draw that ankle back up towards the torso. Right thigh comes back up towards the torso with the knee bend. And we'll just do that 2 or 3 more times. Just with your own breath at your own pace, guiding yourself through fluidity now of both the movement itself, the dynamic movement of the right leg, and the transition between the inhale and the exhale of the breath. And complete one more full cycle. And then with the left ankle still across the right thigh, we're going to let the left foot come down so that it transitions to the right side of the mat. The left tibia fibia shin is roughly vertical here, and that left kneecap is pointing towards the ceiling. Big external hip expander on that left side. Gaze here can be over towards the right. It can be into the left if that feels accessible to you. That does accentuate the twist of the shape, the torsion force throughout the entirety of the body. Or it can be straight up towards the ceiling. And we're not going to be here remarkably long here. We got another 40 seconds. When you're right, we bring the legs back up to neutral. So right knee points towards the ceiling and then drop the left foot down so that it mirrors the right, and both kneecaps point towards the ceiling. Then let's rock the knees a little side to side. Some asymmetry in the openness of our rotation here. Try to find your way back to release any musculature that is gripping or pulling. And then eventually, when your body feels right, when you feel ready, both knees are going to fall over towards the right. Again, if that doesn't feel appropriate, you can keep the right shin vertical and just let the left knee fall into that leg. And we go back to the awareness of the fluidity and the exchange of the inhale and exhale breath. And we just settle into much ease as we can in this early rotation. So there is this king. Really had to debate what story I was going to tell today. There's this king who has just taken over for his father, who's recently deceased. About 25 more seconds here on the second side. He's relatively young. And there is this tradition in this kingdom when a new king takes over the throne that he throws a feast for everyone in the kingdom. When you're right, when you're ready, knees come back to neutral, kneecaps point towards the ceiling. And we'll take our right ankle across our left thigh and settle in here first, right? We want to make sure that we have that figure four kind of appropriately set. You know where we're headed, so there's some dynamic movement coming in the left leg. You want the ankle to be off the kneecap so that we have some level of comfort as we exhale and extend the left leg down the mat into that figure four, get that external rotation on the right hip. And then we inhale and bring that thigh back up towards us. We're just going to go back and forth. Exhale, extending the left leg and inhaling the knee into a bent position. Fluidly working between these two shapes. And maybe one more time in each direction. And we'll eventually meet, with no rush to get here, to the left knee being bent, the right ankle across the left thigh, and then drop that bottom of the right foot down towards the floor. That happens. The right tibia, fibia running vertically or relatively vertically. The right kneecap is roughly pointing straight towards the ceiling. Arm positioning can be at comfort, but we want to make sure that the right shoulder is more or less anchoring us. And then the head position can also be at comfort. You can gaze over towards the right for a little more torsion. You can gaze over towards the left to soften the shape just a touch. So you can stay neutral, gazing at the ceiling, whatever feels comfortable for you. Finding our way back into the breath, right? Especially this early in class, this much ask of our hip flexor, of that lateral edge of the hip capsule itself, can be pretty intense. Try to counteract that intensity through ease of your breath. So that the pace of your breathing is controlling the sensations that you're feeling. We have about 50 more seconds here on this second side. So the kingdom itself is fantastically wealthy. And a huge portion of its wealth, of its success, is due to its geological features. The castle and the main hub of the kingdom is protected on four sides by huge mountain ranges, impassable mountain ranges. When you're right, when you're ready, knees come back to neutral. Both feet come to the mat, and we'll add a little lateral sway. Start to move through the movement you've created here, the range of movement you've created here in your hips. Eventually, we will bring our knees back to neutral. And as we do so, let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. And just pause here, feel held here, feel supported here. Remember, you can take your hands down and clasp the lateral edge of the hips to help support the thighs if they feel too heavy, if they feel like they're opening too much room, or if the abductors feel like they're fatiguing. And we'll be here for about 30 more seconds. So the only way into the capsule itself is through this massive valley that just is carved right through this mountain range. Just enough road, enough room for a single road. And so all goods and services coming to and from the castle go directly down this road. When you're right, when you're ready, we help the knees back up, kneecaps point towards the ceiling. And let's extend our legs straight down the mat. And then just roll straight over onto our bellies. And we'll end up in crocodile pose here. So as we roll into our bellies, hands stack underneath the forehead. And just let your body be at ease. There's a little bit of a challenge in that we have so much hip room here. There might be some anterior hip collapse. Pretty uncommon that we do that, but because we haven't touched any of the body other than the hips, we may have a little anterior hip collapse. You may feel the pelvic bowl pressing against the mat a little bit more firmly than normal, and that may cause some lumbar discomfort. If that happens, just squeeze the glutes and try to neutralize the spine a little bit. So to combat any lumbar discomfort, we just squeeze the glutes and give a little more integration there. Everything else can be just fully at ease. So the king is dealing with a couple of things. One, the grieving process of having lost the king, his father, previous king. And two, having the responsibility of planning this celebration, this festival of his new ascension to the throne. Another 30 seconds here of just feeling the body at ease. So these vendors have made their way to the castle, and they're kind of showing their goods, their services, and what they could offer to this upcoming festival. Just a few weeks away. And one after one, these vendors are coming through, and the king and his collection of advisors are making choices. When you're right, when you're ready, we are going to slide the hands essentially just kind of straight forward, and then elevate the torso so that we have a 90-degree bend in the elbow. So we're headed towards Sphinx. Tops of the feet are anchoring down. The handprints are anchoring down into the mat. The shoulders are going to get broad here, and that's going to be our point of emphasis. So think about the edges of the shoulders pushing towards the edges of the mat. As that happens, you'll feel how the integration between all that hip space that you've already offered and your torso come into play, where those two areas interlace, and really allow that relaxation at the base of the sacrum into the lumbar spine, allow you to get wider and wider through the shoulder structure. Remember, as always in our Sphinx pose, we have the opportunity to adjust the height by playing with the head angle, with the cervical spine angle. So feel free to adjust and move the head until you get ease through the entirety of the spinal column. And then feel that width in the shoulders as we press towards the lateral edges of our mat. And we'll be here for 30 more seconds. Width across the sternum. So counteracting that computer shape energy, that cell phone shape energy, broadening out and feeling the sternum really leading into the depth of the shape as the shoulders get wider and wider and the hips sink further and further into the connection they're making with the mat. And then we'll release our head back down to our mat, slide our hands back underneath our forehead for crocodile pose. And then turn your head over towards the right. So you're gazing out over the right. Now, you can adjust the hand positioning here, kind of making a diamond between the thumbs and the index fingers can be a nice place so that you can lay your ear in there, especially if you have any ear jewelry on. And then when you're ready, we're going to flip the head the opposite direction. So we gaze over the left. So there's a line of vendors kind of wrapped around the castle. And through the entirety of the day, King and his advisors go through and they pick out who they're going to use. And at the end of the day, everyone is gone. The line is gone. Very late into the evening, everyone heads to bed. And this huge snowstorm rolls in. And the snow begins to pile up. When you are right, when you are ready, let's bring our head back to neutral. As the head comes back to neutral, we are going to take our left leg and extend it out towards half frog. So that's a knee bend. The knee comes towards hip height, right? It doesn't necessarily have to come to hip height. Now, if you have that blanket or you have that towel and you overrode my mistake of not including that, you're welcome to slide it underneath the knee. If that's not accessible to you, just slide to the right and let your knee be on your mat. That offers some nice support for that medial edge of the knee. And we'll just settle in here. Now, with the settling sensation, you can, if it feels accessible to you, turn your head over towards the right once again to add a little torsion from the lumbar through the thoracic and into the cervical spine. But you don't have to do that. The snow is piling up the next day as the castle itself begins to wake up. And the orders for the food for this upcoming festival are placed. The cold weather and the snow make it an ideal situation where the food can be brought in. It can be kept preserved without any fear of spoilage. And over the course of the next few days, more and more food shows up, and it is stockpiled in these cold bins. About 70 more seconds here. After all the food has arrived, everything is put away. The king comes down, he does an inspection. It's late at night, but they see everything. They're kind of torch lighting. And once again, the castle heads to bed. And as they do, the snow picks up once again. And the king's wife, the queen, asks if the food will be okay if it gets snow piled on top of it. The king says, no worry, it's actually beneficial. That night, the weight of the snow high up in the mountains is so intense, it causes a massive avalanche that fills the entire valley, the one entrance and exit to the castle itself, with snow and trees and ice, rocks, boulders. And when the king wakes up the next morning, he finds himself in quite a pickle. When you're ready, left leg extends down the mat, head returns back to neutral if we chose to make that rotation, and then we'll take this to the second side. Our right leg extends out towards half frog, roughly hip height with that knee, right? Doesn't need to be hip height, but we're aiming towards that direction. And then the head settles in a crocodile-like pose, and we can turn our gaze over towards the left if it feels comfortable. Remember, if you don't have that blanket or towel handy, you can just slide yourself to the left and get the weight off that MCL right on that medial edge of the knee there. You have that ligament that can be pretty tender if we put pressure on it. So just an opportunity to shift the body weight over to the left and get the knee on the mat itself. So King wakes up, he gets all these reports of the road being closed. And he sends out an all hands on deck message. He wants every able-bodied being to work on clearing the road of this avalanche debris so that the rest of the vendors can arrive for this upcoming festival, now only a few days away. And so the king, before the sun even rises, is out there working with a shovel in his bare hands, pulling snow, pulling ice, pulling rocks, trying to make some impact. And more people start to come. And they work through the entirety of the day's light. And as the sun tucks behind the mountains, King's advisors come over to him and say, sir, we should send everybody home. We haven't made much of an impact today. I don't think continuing for the last few hours of possible work is going to be beneficial. King nods knowingly, and he sends the message that everyone should go home. And he stays well beyond anyone else until he finally goes home too. Sopping wet, freezing cold, and in a great deal of physical pain from the sheer cold that has been against his body since before the sun rose. And the next morning, King gets up, he sends the same all hands on deck signal to everyone in the castle and the community. Every able-bodied being is to be clearing this route. And they work tirelessly throughout the day. Again, the king sends everyone home as the sun crests behind the mountains, and he stays long after everyone else before finally retiring. Last 30 seconds here on this side. When you're ready, the right leg extends straight back and behind you. Feel that length throughout the body. Feel the hips openness here. Maintain that hip openness as you slide the hands underneath the shoulders. Bring some strength into the musculature just above the knees. Push into the hands, and we're going to press ourselves back into child's pose. Try to stay as low as you possibly can as we transition back into this child's pose shape. And just settle here with the hinge of the hips being and providing the depth of the shape. The torso just resting on the lower half of the body. And the openness of the hip hinge allowing for more of that torso weight to be supported by the legs with each exhale. So on the third day since the avalanche, the king wakes up, same all hands on deck signal. Every able-bodied being comes down, and they are starting to make some progress. Their work, their effort is starting to be shown. And the mood, the spirit of the community is lifted as they see that this project might be possible. The challenge is, even if it is possible, the event is tomorrow. And there are a lot of preparations that need to be done once they can get this road cleared. Not the least of which is the food preparation itself. The advisors are all advising the king to call off this event. He's saying, no, this is a tradition that has been around for 1,000 years, and I'm not going to be the one that breaks it. Last 30 seconds here. With your inhale breath, we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, we're just going to slow Lolasana transition into seat, legs extended out in front of us for a little staff position. Okay, so we have a lot of hip room, but we have not touched the hamstring. So keep that in mind. The knees might want to bend as you bring yourself forward and into a fold. And allow your body to let go in this seated forward fold. As the day wears on, the progress is actually becoming more and more rapid. they're starting to move pieces of debris that are massive. And as they move, the road is getting more and more accessible. And the reports continue to come into the king that the other side is getting cleared as well. And as the sun crests behind the mountains, there's probably only a few more hours of work that needs to be done. And the king makes a hard decision. He asks everyone to stay. And over the next few hours, the road is cleared. And there's a massive euphoria that breaks out through the group that has been working on this from both sides of this avalanche blockage. We're going to give ourselves 30 more seconds here. You're right. When you're ready, we walk our spine back to vertical. Reorient into full length here. Make sure you take out that flexion energy and get into a neutral extension. And then let's lower ourselves back onto our backs. And we integrate that forward fold, that hip work. And the fluidity of our breath right back in to where we started practice, where we started class. About 30 seconds here just to feel the spine and the hip integration with the mat underneath us once again. No, we never got up. It's been quite a long time since we were on our mat. So re-feel the sensations, the variance in sensations that are now available. And then when you're right, we're going to walk our feet out to the width of the mat and let the knees fall in towards one another. Arms can come out towards cactus here. They can also be in T, or they can be down by your waist. They can also be stacked on the sternum. Something that feels right for the shoulders here is what we're looking for. So the road is cleared. There's this euphoria through this group. And the king's advisors come over to him and they're like, what should we do next? I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Should we call the kitchen staff so that they can start cooking? Should we get the places set? And the king says, no, it's not fair. These men, these women, these children have all worked 3 days straight from sun up to sundown. I can't ask them to go do more work now. And so he sends everyone home and to bed. And he makes his way into the royal kitchen. And he turns on or lights up the stoves, the ovens. And in 20 different ovens, he puts 20 different roasts. And on top of the stoves, he has piles and piles of veggies, roots, stews. And hung over this giant fire, he has this huge cauldron where he pours a 50-pound bag of lentils. And he fills the cauldron to the brim with water and lets that hang over this fire to slow cook. Last 60 seconds here. Feel the base of the sacrum anchoring you here, and think about the length all the way through the top of the head, so that the spinal column is as long and as neutral as it's ever been. When you're ready, inhale and take the knees back out to the width of the ankles, and then walk the ankles back in line to the hip of the width of the hips. And then we will inhale and pull the thighs in towards the rib cage. Hands come on top of the shins or behind the hamstrings, whatever feels most appropriate for you. And give yourself a nice squeeze here, thinking about the spine being long and neutral, just like it was when we had the feet out wide and the knees in. Now we just happen to have some pressure on the hip joints. If this feels accessible to you, you can transition to a happy baby. Hands on those lateral edges of the feet or maybe on the ankles. Thinking again about keeping the spine flat and neutral, really feeling that neutrality here. And then see what it feels like to bring the bottoms of the feet together, if that's accessible to you. Toes pointing towards the ceiling, and you can slide that grip to the ankles here. And then release the feet down to the mat. As the feet touch the mat, lift into the belt line for a little bridge. Try to take the hips up to a neutral alignment, and then extend the arms towards the wall behind you. Like you're trying to lengthen the entirety of the torso now from the hips to the hands. And then squeeze the shoulders down away from the ears, and keep that as you slowly release the tailbone down to the mat. Let your arms relax out to cactus so the shoulders can be at ease. And we're going to go through that one more time. So we load the hips into bridge, lifting. Get that sensation of lift, then the arms extend away from you, fingertips reaching towards that wall behind you, then draw the shoulders down away from the ears and maximize that cervical spine length. Push the head towards the wall behind you, Keep that energy as you lower the tailbone back down to the mat and release the arms back to cactus. One last time, let the knees sway side to side. King's wife, the queen, comes in and asks what she can do to help. And the king says, "Oh, honey, I need you to go to bed. Tomorrow there will be hundreds of people here waiting to greet you, and I need you to be at your sharpest." When you feel right, when you feel ready, knees return to neutral, kneecaps towards the ceiling. Let your eyes close. Let your awareness drift within. Ask yourself if there's anything you might want or need before Shavasana, and offer yourself anything that might be. And then when you're ready, when it feels right, when it feels appropriate, relax into a physical shape and state where you can appreciate Shavasana. The king sends his wife to bed and he's running around the kitchen, stirring things and rotating roasts. And the clock is just spinning towards daylight again. There's a moment where everything seems relatively caught up, and he just sits down on the floor and lets his head tuck into his knees. And as he does so, he drifts to sleep. Long before the sun rises, the queen's eyes pop open in bed, and she reaches over to her right where she expects her husband to be, and he's not there. And she bolts from bed and she runs down into the royal kitchen. Black smoke is billowing out the door, and she runs in and she finds her husband slumped over on the floor. She wakes him up and pulls him from the kitchen. And they two kind of gather his energy and run in and put out all the fires. All the roasts are ruined, all the vegetables are ruined, everything is ruined. And the king just slumps down in tears. And his wife is kind of going through the kitchen and trying to clean up the messes. The king says, everyone worked so hard to make this possible, and I've ruined it. And she makes her way over to the cauldron of lentils, and she pulls off the lid, and they're perfect. And she says, you haven't ruined anything. Look, we have lentils. Start to bring some movement to your fingers and your toes. The king says, lentils aren't going to solve this problem, honey. I appreciate your positivity, but people have gathered here. People are coming here already right now to participate in a feast. And they're going to get here and they're going to see me as a failure. Moving into your wrist and your ankles, your elbows and your knees, your shoulders and your hips, neck and your head. Eventually, we bring enough movement through our body that we can utilize that movement to transition from the shape we are in back into a seat. And in the seated space, our spine gets tall, breath gets fluid. The transition between the inhale and the exhale gets as smooth as we can make it. Once again, eyes closed, palms up. And his wife sits him down and she says, honey, no one's going to look at you as a failure. You're going to serve them lentils. And you're going to do it with a smile, and you're going to do it as you are. And they're going to love you because of who you are, not what you give them. And that's how it's going to be. So your next inhale, bring your hands together at heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, especially on the 7th day, can you remember that people are not expecting perfection from you? People are not wanting perfection from you. They're wanting you. And allow them to enjoy that and see how that changes your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you. Have a wonderful holiday break here. No class next Sunday. Sunday is Christmas. Hope you enjoy the heck out of this week. Hope you have a lovely time with your friends and family, and I will see you again very soon. Love the heck out of you. Mwah. I'll be here tomorrow night.